let's give an example. Let's say if they back-engineered alien craft starting from 1947, Roswell, which may have been crashes before 1947, but this one seemed to have a lot of attention. If they back-engineer that and we have a fleet of these craft that we've learned to fly and are flying around them, we've had 60-some odd years to do that with. But does that mean that they understand the totality of what they back-engineered? I would take probably the best scientists, the best physicists that the world is able to buy and bet against it. It takes time for a society, even with hints, to grow to the point where you're able to use everything that an advanced society that's perhaps thousands or millions of years older, how could we catch up in 60 years or 100 years? So it's not logical. So when you say, yes, this is a smoking gun, it's a smoking gun from the standpoint of academic science. Here we have something you can put your finger on, you can look at it through a microscope, feel it, touch it, test it, and it doesn't come from here.
Fascinating. On a personal level, when some of these patients get these implants removed, what are they feeling? Are they feeling fear? Are they elated that they're removed? Just tell us about, on a personal level, what these people go through.
Well, most abductees are in a constant battle with themselves as to the reality of the situation. Many abductees would rather be diagnosed with a specific mental disease, which could be treatable, than to say I am the victim of somebody coming here from some society somewhere else and taking me against my will for some unknown reason and then doing something with my body. So, on the other hand, when they wake up in the morning and they've got a mark that wasn't on their body the night before, or they wake up and they have the feelings of the flu, with muscle aches and pains, extremely thirsty, vivid memories of something that went on, or they wake up and they're not wearing the bedclothes that they went to bed with, then they are in a situation where they begin to wonder, was this a dream or is it a reality? And that begins to carry through. So in most abductees, and I've studied now hundreds, if not thousands of cases, this battle will continue beyond that of a metallic or non-metallic object that's in the body. One of the things that when they come to the realization that we have an x-ray of an object that was in my body that wasn't there the night before, it tends to push them towards the reality that, yes, this is a real phenomenon. It's occurring to me, in our real 3D world, not in a dream or some delusional dream state. Right. So then they accept the reality, and then they have to decide whether they want to keep it or whether they want it out. So naturally, all the patients that we've done the removals on, have wanted it out.
In your opinion, what do you think that these implants are doing? Are they perhaps changing a very DNA structure of an individual, or maybe they're tracking devices? What do you think about that?
I'm fairly well convinced that they are not tracking devices, and this is based on several interviews I've done with abductees that have had objects that did not want them removed. One was a case in Brazil who had two objects in a toe, but she chose not to have it removed. I lost touch with her, and I really don't know what happened. But she told me in discussing what these objects did, I said, well, you think it could be a tracking device? And she just laughed. I mean, she just gave me the horse laugh. And I said, well, why do you think that's so funny? She said, well, let me tell you. There was an episode with ETs in which they stopped a bug in mid-flight, right in front of her, in some kind of a beam of light or beam of energy. And they told her that they had the ability to track the DNA of that bug anywhere on this planet. So she said, do you think it's really necessary to have a device to do that? Well, that was some years before we, geneticists, earthly geneticists, realized that each one of our DNA strands has its own electrical configuration. So if we were smart enough, and maybe someday we will be smart enough, all we have to do is build a receiver. If we build a receiver for your DNA, I could track you anywhere. So an advanced civilization using an artificial device to track you, I don't believe is makes any sense whatsoever. So what do these things do? Some think they could be behavior modification devices. I really came up with a pet theory. I think that since most abductions involve the taking of ova and sperm, that it's pretty safe to say there's some genetic effect that's going on. Now, Dr. David Jacobs thinks they're making hybrid beings to perhaps repopulate the planet in case some disastrous event occurs, or maybe for some other reason. I'm not saying he's wrong. They very well could be a plan to develop hybrids, and maybe there's hybrids among us. But I think that the spectra of the phenomena is so worldwide and involves so many people all over the planet. I don't think that's the main objective of the group who's doing the most of the abductions. I think that it's more logical to me that they're doing something with our genetics, which they've probably done before. Because if you especially would know, if you look into the biblical history, there's things in the Bible that have all kinds of indications that people have been changed from time to time. Going back all the way to the story of the Tower of Babel.
Sure.
We build the tower, it goes up, God doesn't like it, and what does he do?
Confuses everyone's language.
He confuses the language. Well, what's the converse of that? If he confuses the language so that you can't communicate, and there were some extensive geographical areas which had to develop, as we did, our own language, then how did we communicate before? But there are people that I have met personally that if there is such a thing as a hybrid, they sure fill the bill.
How would you describe that, elaborate on that for us?
Well, I can give you a classic example. I did last year, I think it was the Bay Area UFO Expo, and a tall fellow with sparse blonde hair came up and was sort of listening to one of our conversations and seemed to be very interested and so on, and one of the members of our group struck up a conversation with him, and in the course of the conversation he was asked, where do you come from? He said, well, I came from a long way to this conference to hear what you researchers have had to say. And it's, well, how far did you come? Well, I came from Colorado. And that's really great. What do you do? Well, I'm a computer electronics engineer. I work with the computers. And he was asked, well, I guess you're probably a really good skier. And he said, a what? Skiing. Don't you go skiing? And he said, what's skiing?
Whoa.
Well, I think to myself many times, what would it take to convince the masses? Because it would have to, if President Obama came out on national television and said, ladies and gentlemen, I have something to tell you. This is one of the most important things that's happened to mankind. We now know that there are extrasolar planets that have life forms like us, and not only that, but we've learned that they are and have been visiting here for many, many years. I would predict that the following thing would happen: would people, turn the dial and find out what the score on the Lakers game is, or a craft, for example. About mass. A craft comes down, lands at rush hour time in the middle of the Hollywood freeway, talk about panic. Yeah, I think there really would be a panic because people would be right away on their cell phones calling some division of the state, Caltrans, to find out when they were going to get it out of there so that they could get home, to watch the Rams. So, that would be the panic.
That's it.
So people are so entrenched in their daily activities. Okay, well, that's nice. We're being visited by non-terrestrials, but I still got to get up and go to work in the morning, and I'm lucky to have a job because, etc. So what would it take to really, show mankind that the most important thing in history is going on? Better than the president, I think, if Walter Cronkite was alive. And he came out on television, he'd have a better chance of convincing anybody than anybody else I know. So maybe it's only going to come if there is some kind of a mass, 1939 type landing, non-hostile, landing with people, constantly looking up. People never look up. They look down. They look straight ahead. They don't look up. You have people, planes flying by laying chemtrails. And they look up and they say, oh, look, that's a nice thing that the airplane's doing. Must be cold up there because look at the ice crystals. Of course, that was laid down at 6 a.m. and it's now 5 and the sky's all cloudy. So, waking up the masses, that's the big question.